Right. Good evening, members, and good evening, officers. Good evening to members of the public and to anybody watching on our YouTube channel. And welcome to our planning committee meeting this evening on the 10th of March. We're waiting for a couple of members, I think, who will think there's traffic lights everywhere. We'll just wait for Councillor Abbott to come in. Right. So first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Diamond, who hasn't got a substitute for this evening, but otherwise we are all due to be here. I think Councillor Beaver's probably stuck with those traffic lights arriving shortly. Next item on the agenda, item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest or other registrable interest related to items of the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? Anybody? Okay, that is no. Next item on agenda, item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. I have before me the minutes of the meeting on the 17th of February. Do you wish to sign that as a correct record? Yes. Moved by Councillor Ritchie. Oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Abbott, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I believe there's an omission in the minutes.
Yep.
On the Penfield Lane application. I believe we agreed to change the specification for the public right-of-way, and that's not been captured in the minutes.
Can you tell me which page that's on, Councillor Abbott?
Page 90.
Page 90.
Under Schedule 10.
Schedule 10.
It should refer to...
Highways and public transport.
Sorry, Chairman. Councillor Abbott queried with me earlier, and he is correct. On page 90 of the minutes, it relates to the application... can't recall the number offhand now, but it's one of the Penfield Lane applications. It was in the report that a requirement for a footpath at Bailey Bridge Road was no longer required. The county had stipulated it couldn't be provided. So that has been omitted from the minutes, so it should be included. So it is a correction to the minutes.
Yeah, I think the original was the county wanted a public right-of-way made up to a higher standard, and we said no, it's going to stay as it is through negotiation with the applicant. But that's not captured in the minute under Schedule 10 of Highways and Public Transport.
Councillor Bothrind.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I know we're querying the minutes, and I am now even more confused because, first of all, I was told as a county member that the county wouldn't support it, so there was going to be no footpath. But I've since Councillor Jeffries has sent an email and copied me in where they say they are going to do it. So I actually don't know, as the county member, whether there is actually going to be a footpath there or not now. I mean, there should be, to be fair. So Councillor Abbott's only querying the minutes, quite rightly, but what I would like is officers just to, at some stage, if they could look at that, because we know all of the to and fro between the developers, if we can get a confirmation of whether there is going to be a footpath or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beresford, for the question. I don't know the answer this evening, but I'm happy to take that back and speak with colleagues, and we'll come back to you on that, if that's okay.
So regard the signing of the minutes, Alison, so do I make an manual amendment or...
I found the reference now. Shall I read it to you, Chairman, just so everybody's...
Yes, please do, Alison.
So the report, it related to application 2502388, section 106A, and the report referred to the following matter being deleted. Item D from the list of required highway works. The specified works were to upgrade the existing public footpath between Penfield Lane and Bailey Bridge Road to a footway cycleway and are no longer deemed viable by the local highway authority. So that should have been included in the minute, that paragraph.
Okay, can we add that I mean, if I sign them now, will that be subject to that being added to the minutes, or do I want to manually write it on?
No, I can change it, record it in the minutes of this meeting.
Okay.
I don't need to manually change it now.
Okay.
But I will record in the minutes of this meeting Councillor Bowes-Flint's query, which Mr Pashi will look into.
Okay, so it's okay for me to sign
Yes,
them
we
as
just
they
need
are.
a seconder of Councillor Abbott's
Could somebody
amendment.
second the minutes?
Second with that change. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. All those in favour of me signing with that amendment? Thank you, members. I'll do that now. Okay, thank you, members. Next item on the agenda is item 4, so it's public question time. We don't have any registered speakers under this item, so I will now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the planning applications for this evening. So the first application on our agenda is item 5A. This is application number 25/01920, section 106A. This says at Braintree Village, Charterway, Braintree. And members, I don't know if whether you've seen the email that went round this afternoon. This has actually been withdrawn from this evening's agenda. Did you want to say something, Councillor Bowes-Flint?
Just on that, Madam Chairman, because of the lateness of the County Council Highways Department, which is absolutely disgusting, but we're getting used to it, is if there is nothing changed whatsoever to what we was agreeing to, would members be happy for that to be an officer delegation with yourself and the Vice Chairman's authority, rather than mess Freeport and everybody else who's concerned about and make them wait even more? Because it seems to be we've agreed, I think, that we wanted more, and the proposal was that they come back with more. And now all it is the county have suddenly woke up and said they don't want the buses running at the same time. Well, they could have done that an awful long while ago, but it's just trying to speed things up for people all round, really. But obviously, if members don't agree with it, that's fine. I won't take it personal.
I mean, I've just spoken to Mr Padgett, and he says that procedurally we ought to come back to another meeting because it had been deferred. So, but we will make sure that it comes back to the next meeting, hopefully.
So apologies. So being realistic, we reverted back to the applicant straight away on this. I think it may be unlikely that we can get it to the 31st of March. But it would certainly be on for the following meeting in April that we'd be able to get it to. If we can get it early, we will do. But I think there's some the work that the applicant needs to do and wants to go away and do to see if they could change their proposal.
But good suggestion, Councillor Bowes-Flint. Thank you. Councillor Ritchie, did you want to?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to echo the sentiment of Councillor Bowes-Flint, I think it's pretty poor on Essex County Council's Highways Department perspective to put in such a late note against this application on a Friday afternoon, 2 days before the planning committee. I just want it noted so it's on this recording. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, I think we're probably all in agreement with that, Councillor Ritchie. It's just mucking everybody around. Okay, so we'll now move on to item 5B on the agenda. This is application number 25/00150 REM land east of Braintree Cressing. I think we do have a speaker, I think, on this. Yes, we do. Mr. Julian Moat, if you'd like to come forward, thank you. And then you have 3 minutes to make your statement. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and members. My name is Julian Moat, Planning Director for Chartway Partnerships Group. I address the committee this evening as applicant for our Reserve Matters application, which, if approved, will see the delivery of 35 much-needed affordable homes at Tye Green in partnership with Chelmer Housing Partnership, the largest not-for-profit housing association in Essex. Our application is brought forward in compliance with key development parameters established through the site's extant outline permission. Crucially, it proposes the delivery of 35 fully affordable homes offered for shared ownership and affordable rent tenures, comprising a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom family homes, including a wheelchair accessible bungalow. As set out in the officer report, our application has support from key consultees, including the Council's Housing Enabling Officer, who highlights the benefit of this fully affordable housing scheme, together with no objections raised by statutory consultees on key technical matters, including highways, drainage, ecology and design. Throughout the determination process, we have worked constructively with the Braintree officer team, including key design concessions made by ourselves to strengthen architectural distinctiveness, the inclusion of tree-lined streets and changes to road layouts to reflect highway requirements. This results in a high-quality scheme which meets the overarching requirements of the Government's National Planning Policy Framework, Braintree Planning Policies and the Essex Design Guide. The development is designed to the latest energy efficient standards, comprising EPC-A rated homes, including solar PV panels, air source heat pumps and EV charging infrastructure, all aimed at exceeding current building regulations and supporting more sustainable living for future affordable housing occupants to manage ever-increasing household running costs. Together with the new homes, the development includes an above policy quantum of open and amenity green space, together with an on-site children's play area, delivering attractive and usable facilities for future scheme residents. Consenting the development this evening will unlock Section 106 contributions secured through the outline consent, an investment of circa £470,000 into local community infrastructure upgrading works across healthcare, sports and education facilities. To conclude, our development will materially contribute to the delivery of much needed affordable family homes within the district, set within a high quality and well considered design that accords with the overarching outline planning permission principles and key national and local planning policy requirements. I therefore urge the committee to endorse the officer recommendation before you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moat. We have another person to speak on this, Mr. Rob Draper, who is from, is also from the applicant. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman, members. My name is Rob Draper. I'm Strategic Regeneration and Partnerships Lead at CHP, the landowner and the Developing Housing Association. I'm addressing the committee this evening alongside our partners Chartway for a reserved matters application for 35 new affordable homes at Tye Green. CHP is the largest not-for-profit housing association in Essex. We're currently in the closing stages of a merger with Estuary Housing Association to form a company called Delta Housing Association, which will start on the 1st of April 2026. This merger allows CHP to enhance our investment in the Essex area and continue to deliver more new and sustainable homes for our customers. Where we can deliver more homes on time with our local authority partners is a key consideration of where we make our investments within Essex. We purchased the land in May 2024 with the benefit of an outline planning permission, with the intention to deliver the consented site for 100% affordable housing. The site has a standard Section 106 agreement, which means that CHP's proposals will deliver many, many more affordable homes than is secured through the planning policy. This application is made is to secure the detailed design approvals so we can deliver these new high quality affordable homes for our customers in Braintree. When we purchased the land, we'd intended to be on site in May 2025 and build the homes ready for customers to move in late 2026. Since our purchase, our reserved matters application submission in 2024, we've been through numerous redesigns and consultation activities. We've made all the design amendments required to us over the last 24 or so months, and we've worked tirelessly to try and take on board both the comments of planning and highway authorities. We believe we're finally there. With the committee's support, we will have the necessary consent to move into the build contract and to start site in hopefully in early summer 2026. The homes will then be delivered in spring 2028. With the support of Braintree Council, we've also got funding for these homes to help us deliver them as 100% affordable, and this should secure Cabinet approval, I understand, in late March. We are making our Homes England grant application to fund the delivery of these homes and to make the scheme deliverable. CHP cannot make that grant application until we have our planning consent for our scheme. As such, we're pleased to be able to present what we feel is a really attractive housing scheme, meeting the needs of the local population in a highly sustainable and exciting way. And we hope to secure the support of the committee so we can deliver our proposed scheme as set out in our application. We'd also like to thank the officers for their hard work on our application.
Thank you, Ms Draper. There's one thing I've forgotten to do is just to check with Councillor Beavers. She doesn't have any declarations to declare. Thank you, Councillor Beavers. So now we'll move on to the officer presentation, which is going to be given by Jack. Jack.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. I'm presenting a Reserved Matters application 25/00150 REM. This relates to appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, which were reserved from consideration from the outline consent, which was granted at appeal for 35 residential dwellings at the site. Now, the appeal, as is stated in the description, required 40% affordable housing, but as the speakers have indicated, the scheme's coming forward tonight with 100% affordable on the site. This is a site location plan, so land lies on the eastern side of Braintree Road, north of Tye Green, or at the north of Tye Green. It forms an undeveloped gap within the existing settlement pattern. This is, if you can see that, I'll put my mouse where the site is, just for context purposes. We're on the north side of Tye Green, south of Braintree. Site context using oblique aerial imagery shows the site is an undeveloped parcel of land. It also shows, as you can see, the sort of linear settlement character that carries down Braintree Road, and the countryside landscape over to the east. Photos from the ground show the site frontage looking north. In the distance there, if you see, you can see the development that's being built out currently to the south of Braintree, off the roundabout. As you can see, the site maintains open views across the site from the road. This is it looking south towards the neighbouring properties. This is the relationship with the nearest property on the south, known as the Nook. This is the construction access point at the northwest of the site. And this is a close-up picture of the hedgerow and the ditch. You can see the hedgerow's not in the greatest estate, nor has it been, well, it's been subject to people as they drive past, unfortunately, throwing rubbish in there. But you can see this piece of rubbish here kind of shows the depth of the ditch along the frontage. This is the proposed site plan. So, as speakers indicated, we've been through extensive negotiation with the Highway Authority to ensure the layout is workable, as well as our waste services to ensure that all vehicles can use the site in an acceptable manner. So the site comes into a main central road, which officers have worked with the applicant to ensure is a tree-lined street. It then goes into two cul-de-sac arrangements, which terminate at footpaths, and two turning heads to allow that vehicular manoeuvrability around the site. In terms of the street scenes, going from the top down, the top, which is street scene A, shows the site frontage. Below is as you enter into the road, the southeast, so that'll be the right-hand side, is street scene B, the left-hand side being street scene C. Street scene D shows across the rear of the site. E shows the northwest perimeter of the site, and F shows the southeast perimeter of the site. The scale is mainly, as you'll see from this side, mainly 2 stories of a single wheelchair accessible bungalow at plot 5, which provides an appropriate scale transition towards the Nook, which I showed in the photos. Purpose of me showing the street scenes overall shows that there's a consistent design, language and a material palette throughout the development. In terms of the tree protection plan, as noted in the officer report, there is tree removal of T7 at the point of the construction access. However, officers consider that the extensive new planting delivered through the site will be a net arboricultural benefit over time. The landscape master plan, I'll zoom in the next, that this shows the specification of planting around the site. And what this shows is the street trees which frame the development, hedgerows framing the road perimeters of the site, and extensive planting within the areas of open space for additional amenity benefit. It's native planting, so it supports biodiversity, and conditions have required an appropriate hedgerow mix and maintenance details. There's a slight discrepancy in the report. It states that the actual open space requirement is 0.591 hectares. It's actually 0.0591. So this is in the context of the Section 106 securing 0.45 hectares when actually the policy would require it to provide 0.05. Nonetheless, that quantum of open space is met and exceeded, so officers are comfortable to bring it forward to members for consideration. In terms of consultation updates, we received no comment, so that is Highways saying we have no comment. That's not them saying we haven't, well, it's not us not hearing from them. The lead local flood authority, however, we haven't heard from them. Now, we're suitably comfortable in conversation with them. There'll be no objection. This was just with regards to one of the turning heads requiring a short culvert. But as they are the flood authority, we would be, well, officers consider it appropriate to record their comments. So what officers would seek tonight is a resolution to grant, subject to there being no objection from the lead local flood authority. As I say, we're expecting it imminently, so it shouldn't cause any further delay. But yeah, that's the situation with regards to that. So in terms of the summary, the principle of development and access matters are established under the outline, which granted appeal. Design, layout, scale and landscape details are considered to be acceptable. The scheme provides 100% affordable housing exceeding policy and Section 106 requirements, and the tenure mix is considered acceptable. The open space does vary in quality from the frontage to the rear, but overall it far exceeds what policy requires. So officers consider on balance it's acceptable. The scheme would result in the loss of one tree and partial removal of a hedgerow, although this will be compensated for on-site planting and conditions to secure ongoing maintenance. And impacts are noted to the neighbouring property, the Nook, in terms of outlook. However, it's not considered to such an extent the amenity would be adversely impacted to an unacceptable degree. So overall, officers consider it complies with local and national policy. It provides clear benefits for the provision of affordable homes to the local housing supply, together with an acceptable design and landscaping quality. Limited harms have been balanced in the planning balance, but overall it's considered that the significant benefits suggest the application falls in favour of approval. Therefore, officers recommend the application is approved, subject to lead local flood authority confirming that they have no objection to the application. Just for further context as well, a detailed drainage strategy is a condition under condition 11 of the outline, so what we're requiring from them is confirmation that the layout is acceptable, and then we can confirm the details in that condition. So thank you. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jack. Members, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, obviously the principle of this site's been already there because of the appeal decision. But I just wanted to say to members, this is the 7th housing estate at Ty Green in the last decade. The Ty Green has, with this and the others, Ty Green will have more than doubled in size, and there are still applications in the pipeline. 3 of those 7, if I remember right, were on appeal. And I thought that the comment which I just wanted to highlight most in the officer's report referred to the rural character of Ty Green. It's been destroyed, completely destroyed. Ty Green is now separated from Braintree by a thread, and the neighbourhood plan, which the Cressing Parish Council worked very hard to draw up, has just been completely ignored by both this council and the planning inspectors, not in terms necessarily of detailed policies, but in terms of the overall ethos of keeping Ty Green as a village. For a village to double in size, which is not a key service village, to something like 800 houses in a decade, is clearly an unsustainable level of development. Which brings me on to my, I've got 2 questions. I'll finish what I'll say and I'll embed the questions. My first question is, the officer didn't say how people are going to walk out of that site. So when I finish speaking, could you explain please what the pedestrian access is? And related to that, we have been trying for decades, well, myself as a councillor in Cressing for the last decade, but other councillors before that and residents, to get a completed hard surface footpath connecting Tye Green to Braintree. And Essex County Council, at every available opportunity, has failed to secure any developer agreement through the relevant highways contributions to connect up. So my first question is, was that even discussed as part of this application? Because if it hasn't been, we're going to be left with this flooded clinker path, about a 100-yard section, between Tye Green and the 250 house Persimmon development that's currently being built. And this is important because Essex County Council has just written to parents in Tye Green saying they're going to withdraw the bus service to get the children to school in Braintree on the basis that they now have a completed path, which they don't have. So, you know, to add to all the other comments made about county, that's another one. I mean, it's a Horlicks in the parlance. So that's my first question. The map that's shown in the plan is out of date. So the map, the coloured map at the start of the officer report, the woodland in the corner there no longer exists. Persimmon have destroyed most of that for their current development. So this development, although as I say, the principle's been established and houses are going to be built there, must be seen in the context of it is effectively leaving just a sliver between Tye Green going northwards and Braintree coming southwards. It's good to see that the developers are proposing solar PV and heat pumps, I believe, on every house, so that's really good. And I did check that the plans actually include, because I saw a later application we got where we're requiring a condition for where the solar panels are going to be. In this one, I think it's already embedded in the plan, so where it refers to in condition 2. So that's good. Views of the countryside, well, not really. Your views to the north are being lost to the Persimmon development. You don't have any views the other side. And of course, if we do allocate, I know we've got a process to go through, but if we do allocate the 2,500 houses coming out of Braintree at east of Braintree, your views of the countryside that way are going to be severely diminished. And then that brings me on to my second question, which is a bit more detailed, but I think it's an important one. It's good to see that the mixture for the replanting is going to include a high proportion of native. But in paragraph 11.2.13, it gets a bit heavy against elder. It says we don't want any elder. They're no good, very invasive. I would like to ask, please, for consideration that we don't remove elder entirely, but we reduce the number in the mix. So that relates to condition 7. So it says omit Sambucus nigra elder from all hedgerow mixes. So I'd like to ask if that can be changed to reduce rather than remove, because elder's a really important native plant, very, very good for insects. And you never know, some of the residents of these new homes might want to make elder wine. It's possible. Overall, very much welcome the fact that it's going to be 100% affordable. That's obviously a really good thing, and I've long thought that that's where we need to be focusing our attention on housing, but I know we don't always have control of it. But I just wanted to set out, and I'm sure Councillor Bowes-Flint would agree with probably most of what I've said, in terms of how Tye Green has changed and its identity as a village just in 10 years has changed remarkably. But if I could have responses to those 2 points, I'd be grateful. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. I agree. I do have Sambucus nigra in my own garden. I think it's quite an attractive version of the elders, but so I'm not the landscape expert. So I'll ask Jack in a minute to respond to those questions. Councillor Beaver said no.
I'll respond to the second point because I'm just going through the appeal and the 106. With regards to the elder, that was under the advice of our landscape officers and our ecology officers who considered it's an invasive species and their advice it should be removed from the mix, but I think the condition can be flexible. At the end of the day, the purpose of the condition is to secure an acceptable mix. So if members were happy to change the wording to reduce or remove, what we can do is then take that away and keep the condition under review with our landscape and ecology officers. And yeah, as I say, it come from their advice that it should be removed, but I would have no objection myself to the change to reduction.
So you're suggesting on that condition 7A, instead of the word omit, we have replace it with reduce.
Yes.
Brilliant. Happy with that? I see
Happy with
nods. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Now the second question of yours, Councillor Abbott.
So, Councillor Abbott, in terms of the first question, so just picking up the point, I might just get Jack to come back if I can in terms of pedestrian access to and from the site. But in terms of the issue of the footpath, this would be a matter that should have been secured as part of the outline consent, effectively. So what we're looking at here is a reserve matters application. So you're purely looking at the details of the layout, the appearance, landscaping for the site in terms of the access arrangements and any other Section 106, any other highway mitigation. That is something that should have been secured as part of the outline consent. So we haven't got the ability at this stage of the planning process to go back and revisit that, although I don't disagree with the point that you're highlighting. Obviously, this was not a site originally that we were supporting as an authority to come forward, and you know, I note the comments that you've made in terms of the development within Ty Green, and one of the reasons why we were concerned about the site was obviously because of those points originally. Similarly, the real catalyst locally, which we're still unhappy about, is the appeal decision that was lost further down, which is being built out by Persimmon Homes on the corner, because you know, we put a very strong case forward, and unfortunately that was allowed by the planning inspectorate. That was not a site that we were supportive of at officer level, and I think from recollection it came before this committee and it was refused by members of this planning committee. So we do note that. But yeah, in relation to the footpath issue, obviously I can't defend or comment on the comments that have been made by County Highways in relation to the school bus provision and things like that. But in terms of the actual footpath link itself, we wouldn't at this stage be able to secure anything further from the applicants as part of this reserve matters. That time has kind of passed. That's something that should have been secured with the outline.
So I thought that's what you'd say. So I just want to emphasise to the committee and everyone here that this is the second time, because County will have been involved with the appeal, obviously, and this is the second time that County have missed the opportunity to secure developer contribution towards finishing that path off. They failed on the person on site, and they failed on this site. So, I mean, we had an application, didn't we, a month or two ago, where we were requiring a section of footway to be extended to connect up. That's all we were asking for in this location, and we now have a situation where any parents and children who want to walk to the nearest secondary school have to negotiate this flooded clinker path and cross the road without a formal crossing, thanks to Essex County Council's abject failure to build that path. A path which, by the way, was on the local highways panels list when I was a member of it, and we'd started to allocate money towards it, and it was taken off. You'll love this, because we were told it'll get provided when the developments happen.
I think we've got the point. I mean, I think from a planning point of view, I think we can't go any further with this particular application, but I think we all know that even myself, anybody who drives down that road can see there is a section of footpath missing, and it needs to be there. But I think that is for another forum. I think anyway, Councillor. Sorry, Chris is going to come back.
Sorry,
Jack's going to come back.
Apologies, I was going to say Jack could just respond on the pedestrian.
Yeah, there was also a question about how occupants will actually exit the site. So you might have seen, I'll get it up on the screen again, but while I was presenting, screen suddenly changed. That was because I was flicking back to the appeal. But within the appeal, which Neil's kindly got up for me, the inspector did require that no, I'll just read it verbatim, no dwelling hereby permitted shall be occupied until the following have been provided to the site access, and then verbatim, a minimum footway of not less than 2 metres in width to join the existing provision in that respect to the south-east of the site by the property presently named the Nook, incorporating drop curbs as required. So it's not the footpath that we've been talking about that goes towards Braintree, but it does mean that where the layout comes to the access point, there would be a footway that goes towards the south-east of the site, towards the Nook, to allow crossing to the other side, albeit that doesn't go all the way to Braintree, but... And yeah, I'll get the layout plan. So just for the benefit of members, that be a pathway which is delineated here where my mouse is currently moving. So it would move that way. But yeah, the condition in the appeal didn't require any further to the northwest. It does also include upgrades to 2 bus stops as necessary. So there was a given towards sustainable transport. I suppose from my perspective, if I can offer my own thoughts as well, I've seen the incorporation recently of Active Travel England as well, so hopefully the principles that we're talking about of connectivity around sites is hopefully going to be addressed through continual guidance released by ACE, which include walking, wheeling and cycling. So hopefully through subsequent outlines, appeals, etc., that sort of active transport ethos will feed through. But on this site, yeah, we're responding to what was secured at the outline. But yeah.
So the next person who had to speak is Councillor Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to reiterate the points made by Councillor Abbott. And I actually took a drive out yesterday afternoon to have a look at this site. And for me, it just really makes you wonder, what is it about this area that's allowed all of this development to happen in the way that it has? Because there's just nothing there, and it is just becoming so urbanised. That's what really struck me now, is just how urbanised it is. And I also felt that, I mean, I'm disappointed that we haven't had comments from the County Council. I think it said tonight, didn't it? No comments from the County Council. Is that what we said tonight?
Highways.
In terms of highways.
Yeah, they have commented during the life of the application with regards to the layout.
But not for this.
Oh, with regards to the Leeds Local Flood Authority?
Well, didn't it say this evening no comments from highways?
From highway, yeah. So they'd commented previously. They'd raised concerns with regards to the layout and how it functioned, where the layout meets the access point. But we've responded to those concerns, and highways have come back and said, well, on that basis, we've got no comments. So.
I have to be honest, it's disappointing to see that. And one of the things that I felt yesterday was, you know, there's this lack of really understanding where one place ends and another place starts now. And I just found that it just, you know, speed signs and things like that, I really think more could be done, actually. The other question I just wanted to ask was, in the presentation in the public gallery this evening, it was obviously there was quite a lot that came out quite quickly, but I'm sure that there was a mention about a cabinet meeting coming up. It was going to go to cabinet in March, in tonight's presentation, and I just wondered what that meant. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that, and should anybody be declaring any interest this evening? Because there are cabinet members around the table, and I just not understanding. I attend cabinet, but I was just a bit uncomfortable with that, and I just want to understand a bit more about what that is and whether we should be declaring anything. Thank you, Chairman.
So I think it was the speaker rather than Jack was brought it up. So we've been asked to approve the approval of the reserved matters this evening. So that's the appearance, the layout, the landscaping, and so on. So those are the matters that we're asking members to consider. What the applicant and the landowner wants to do is to receive 106 funding from the District Council to help fund the development and provide it was a 100% affordable scheme. So at the moment, we've got 106, which requires a policy compliant level of affordable housing to be provided through the 106. the developer or the landowner wants to provide 100% affordable housing. That's what they were referring to in their presentation. But that, as I understand it, is dependent on the council making a decision to use 106 funds that have been secured for affordable housing to fund the scheme. But that doesn't have a bearing on the decision that members are being asked to make tonight, which is to approve the appearance, the layout, the landscaping and so on of the scheme. So that's a separate matter, which isn't which I don't think has a bearing on the decision tonight. That's to do with the finance of the development and how the development is brought forward and whether there's more affordable housing provided on the development than the 106 requires. So I don't think that, although the speaker referred to it, and I think is quite proud of the fact that that's what they're hoping to be able to do, that doesn't have a bearing on what we're being asked to consider, or we're asking members to consider tonight. So that's why I think members haven't made a declaration on it, because it doesn't have a bearing on the application and the determination tonight. Does that help, Councillor Beavis?
It does help, and thank you for that, Neil. But I just felt, and actually I do feel a little bit uncomfortable about that, just for transparency. I mean, I was quite surprised it was said. And yeah, I mean, I'm pleased you answered it, because I think something needed to be said on it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Neil, for explaining that. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, can I clarify what Councillor Beavis has quite rightly raised, and I didn't know this was going to be said. As Cabinet Member of Housing, this has not come in front of me. It has not come in front of me at all. So I have had no say, no hear, no anything on this as far as I am concerned. What happens is the council's decision, not this committee's decision or my decision. It's the council's decision of what happens to that money. So with that, obviously I agree with absolutely everything that Councillor Abbott has said. Having born and lived in the village all my life, it is not the village that I was born into, and it never will be now. This is the last gap that we've got, and it's being filled, and it's already been decided that it's being filled. So Crescent is not a village anymore, and I understand Councillor Abbott's frustration of the footpath, because it is down to Essex Highways absolutely mishmash of what they've done on the application, that where that footpath starts and where it disappears and where it ends. But let's just remind members of the reason we've got the footpath that we have that's actually got a surface on it is because the parish clerk's husband used to be in charge of the highways gang, but I'm going back 40 years now. And when they used to take the surface off the roads, he used to get them to put it on along there so that there was something for people to push their prams and wheelchairs on. It's no thanks to the County Council at all, who received £60,000 all those years ago when the garden centre was built to build the footpath. And Councillor Abbott is quite right. When I used to represent that area, I started the fight, and he's still continuing it. Absolutely donkey's years later, and it's still never happened. I mean, it's absolutely hideous. It is a real mirror of how highways are acting at the moment, where the footpath completely comes to a stop, where people expected to go. And that road is dangerous now. It is one of the most dangerous roads in this county now, the B1018. However, and I understand his frustration, but it isn't this applicant's responsibility, because that footpath where it stops and where it should start is way beyond their remit. They're doing the bit of footpath that affects their site. So I have to just say I accept that it is not their responsibility whatsoever. What I'm more interested in, one, it's good that we're seeing a bungalow on a site, because, you know, I always like to see the bungalows, and I think most members do. Well done. The only thing that concerns me, that I would like the officers to perhaps expand more, is that it was said that there was 2 turning heads. And I know for a fact turning heads cause a problem, because people park in them. So have we got the parking standards of two cars per property? Is there any extra parking? And is there any way that the turning heads can stay as a turning head rather than an extra parking place? Thank you.
Yeah, I understand the issue. It usually comes down to it's a courtesy, isn't it, that people don't park in the turning heads, but we know people do. I think there's adequate visitor parking on space. Each property has a required parking standard, 2 per property. We're satisfied with the parking layout. With regards to monitoring, the parking in those turning heads would be probably fall primarily to the landowner management company if they're able to enforce that. But you know, we can't. They are turning heads. They're required on development. So, and as I said, yeah, there's adequate visitor parking. So there shouldn't be a reason why people park in the turning heads. But as with turning heads and developments, we can't control that behaviour.
Yeah, thanks for that, and I get that, and it gives me slight assurance, although a development that was done very close to my house was given 2 spaces per property, and one property with 2 people living in it have got 5 spaces, and one car that's been on jack since Christmas, so we know what happens, and it just worries me about the turning head where people won't be allowed to turn because they'll have to reverse out. And I would hate to think anybody had to reverse out onto the B1018 because it would be fatal. Thank you.
Sorry, just a point on that, which I think is important. So I think it's an important issue that you've raised, but just to give, I suppose, some comfort around that point in terms of the highway safety. So where the turning heads are located, they're on the arms, again with the layout plan. So they're not directly on the actual main axis as you'd come out onto Braintree Road. And ultimately, I think if there is an issue here, because the roads are not being put forward for adoption, ultimately it will come down to the management of the site, and it would be something that the future residents of that site would need to raise with the, if it became a problem, it would have to be something which would be dealt with through that management arrangement for the actual site itself. But yeah, the concern that you've raised in terms of you wouldn't want people reversing the access, and this is where highways have commented, there's no issues in terms of the main access onto the actual main road. You wouldn't have that situation.
And lastly, Madam Chairman, sorry, the field, as you look at it, as you face it on, the field, basically from the middle to the nook, absolutely floods. So I'm glad there is some flooding thing there because it floods every time there's rain. And I know all the drainage will be done, but it has flooded ever since I can remember. So yeah, it's good that they're doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byers-Flint. Which is the drainage condition?
So condition 11 of the outline permission required a detailed drainage strategy to be confirmed prior to commencement, and it's to be in accordance with the principles of the information that was submitted at the outline stage. We've been in correspondence with the LLFA, the Local Flood Authority. They haven't objected at all during the life of the application. It's just that we're waiting. As I say, there's a small culvert at the turning head. Based on what we've read from the drainage strategy, the principles are still there. The water course isn't impacted. The drainage is still acceptable. However, I'm not the drainage engineer, and I'd rather record the OLFA's response before we proceed. So,
Thanks. So the conditions in the outline. Thank you.
yes.
And yes, I mean I know that sometimes flat areas can do flood. Surprisingly enough, even though nowhere near rivers. So yes, it's good that that's covered off there. Does any other member wish to make any further comment on this? In which case, would anybody like to move to officer's recommendation? Councillor Spray. That's with the amendment to condition 7.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was only going to say I don't disagree at all with what Councillor Abbott or Councillor Byers-Flint said, and they know the area obviously extremely well. And we know that the majority, not all, but the majority of development around there has come as a result of appeal decisions. It's frustrating, but you know we have it before us tonight. It's the positive is the affordable housing, which is really good to see. And I think the designs and the materials being used are very good. So, yeah, with those changes to conditions, I'm happy to move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott, you seconding?
I'm happy to second.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have mentioned when I spoke first time. Have we got a lighting condition from the original outline consent, or do we need to put one in now? Because there wasn't one in the conditions.
Just checking.
I'm just getting near. I believe it's on the outline, but yeah. So the outline required a. Zoom up. Scroll up. Sorry. A landscape and ecological management plan, or LEMP, which required prescriptions for management actions, including wildlife sensitive lighting design scheme for biodiversity. So it's covered by the outline, part of condition 5, clause 5.
Yeah, we're happy to second, Madam Chairman, on the basis of the change of one word in the
Yeah.
condition for elders.
Okay, lovely. All those in favour of officers' recommendation, including the lead local flood authority? Subjects them have no objection? Great. Thank you very much, members. That is unanimous. So that now brings us on to item 5C on your agenda. This is application number 25/00277 VAR. This is Gimson's King's Chase, Witham. It's page 88 on your agenda. And we do have a speaker on this, who is Mr. Mosley from the applicant, Bellway Homes.
Good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm David Mosley. I'm Planning Director at Bellway Homes, Essex. Following the grant of planning permission in November 2018 for 78 new homes, changes were made to the scheme. These changes were largely driven by adherence to Essex County Council Highways technical requirements, principally to ensure that fire tenders could safely access and manoeuvre within the site. There were also changes derived from the availability of materials during the construction process. These amendments were not regularised at the time. This has meant that the development was not constructed in accordance with the approved plans. This is in relation to some very specific areas, such as turning head locations, garage locations and materials. Bellways recognised that we didn't follow the correct procedures, and we apologise to the Council, the members and our residents for this error, and have tightened our internal processes to make sure that this situation is rectified. Following discussions with your officers, we submitted the application before you tonight to regularise the position, and we thank very much the officers for their ongoing engagement. Garden sizes have reduced in a very small number of instances based on technical requirements to locate garages further back from the internal spine road. Notwithstanding this, all homes continue to have good access to good-sized gardens and amenity spaces. Bellways have committed an additional £150,000 towards off-site outdoor recreational facilities, which includes initiatives supported by the Town Council's proposal to create additional enhanced amenity space and a cafe kiosk. This contribution will be to the benefit not only of residents of the development but to the wider community as well. We're also committed to planting additional trees within the development, and I'll draw your attention to condition 9 on the report, which outlines the process by which we will adhere. Whilst there are areas of the development that vary from the approved plans, these were principally driven by adherence to technical and detailed design requirements. The amendments do not detract fundamentally from the overall development as originally approved by members, and the development remains of a very high quality. We trust that members can support the regularisation of the planning position, including the further financial contribution towards the recreational facilities at Witham Town Park. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So now I'm going to ask Neil to give us his presentation on this. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So this is an application to vary condition 2, which is the approved plans condition of the 2018 application, which was granted in 2020, which involved the demolition of the dwelling, which was known as Gimson's, and the construction of 78 dwellings including associated development. As you'll have read from the committee report, there's quite a number of changes, some more consequential than others, but the presentation tonight will go through and give a brief overview of that. Obviously, the report goes through in more detail what the changes are. In terms of the site, I think members who were on the committee at the time will certainly remember this one. It was quite contentious at the time. So this is the Red Line site here. We've got the Witton Park over here and the sports ground cricket pitches. So just for bearings, you've got sort of the play area up here, King's Chase coming through to Newland Street over here, and this is Malden Road down this side, and the access is from Malden Road along Riverview over there. So that's just where we are within the town. So there's two images on the screen just to show the layout. So they probably look graphically different, or more significantly different, I think probably due to the colouring that's been used on the images. But if you just sort of focus on the road layout, you can see, fundamentally that the layout is largely similar, and it's really matters of detail, as the speaker referred to at question time, where there are sort of finer grain changes which have come out through the highway process principally. So just to go through some of the changes. So in terms of highways, there were some changes which the Highway Authority required in terms of adoption. So for example, along the boundary here, the road has just been pulled away slightly more from the edge of the park. So there's a path running along the edge of the path. So there's a slight grass verge on the edge there now, but that was a change which wasn't originally shown. There was also some changes in terms of layout for fire service access. So the fire tender for building regulations needs to be able to get in and turn around to get back out. So there were some changes there in terms of the layout, and turning heads were either added or enlarged to allow the fire vehicle the necessary access. Changes were made to the positioning of a number of garages. So it's not that garages were added or omitted, it was their position that was changed. So these were largely due to, I think it's termed buildability. So there were some instances where the garage would have conflicted with the flue that was going to be fitted for the boiler for the house, which wouldn't comply with building regulations. So there was a need to move the garage because the boiler needed to be at a fixed position inside the house and needed appropriate ventilation. But also there was other instances where the garage would have clashed with the roof form, so it needed to be relocated for that reason. And there was one position where the Highway Authority were concerned that there was a half space or potential for a half space which could have led to a vehicle sort of overhanging the footway or the carriageway. So there was a number of changes there in terms of the siting of garages. In terms of materials, the two images there show where different materials were used. There was a roof tile which was unavailable, so that's shown on the bottom slide, and a different red brick was used, which was shown on the orange. So there was changes there. And then there were a number of changes in terms of between the planning drawings and as built. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but we've covered off the main areas of differences within the report. But you can see things like some of the planning drawings showed glazing bars on the windows, but those haven't been on the built. Some of there was sort of French doors here, which have been replaced with a single door with a glazing pane next to it. And then there's other changes as well, so I won't go through all of them, but just to sort of reassure members, we've included a number of images here which show the planning drawings which they would have seen at the time, and the as-built. There are certainly instances where the as-built is an improvement on what we approved, so it's not all sort of bad news by any stretch of the imagination. So whilst the first one that I showed you didn't have the glazing bars which were on the planning drawings, you can see this house doesn't have the glazing bars, but they've been added actually on some of the houses that have been built. So it's a bit of a mixed bag there. So there's just some other images to show the contrast and the differences, but on some of them, in fairness, it would be very much a question of trying to spot the difference. So there were changes to the landscaping scheme as well that was submitted. With the planning application that was submitted originally, there was one of the reasons the application was contentious was the number of trees and vegetation that were being removed to facilitate the development. The landscaping scheme that was approved at the time specifically specified some quite substantial trees, or that the trees to be planted were to be of a substantial size, and there was a strong number of trees being planted across the site. The revised landscaping scheme that had been submitted with this application showed a reduction in the number of trees, or the omission of some trees, I should say, rather, that were being planted, and also didn't specify the size of trees being planted. It's also we're also aware that a number of TPO trees were removed after the planning permission was granted. So we were aware when the permission was granted that some trees were going to be removed, including some TPOs. Some additional trees have been removed during the process. Bellway's arboricultural consultant, who was monitoring the site, did contact the council's tree officer where those removals were required. That was sometimes due to disease, damage, and replacement planting was proposed. But I think it's fair to say that the landscaping scheme, which was very important to members and to officers when it was recommended for approval originally, we can't really be confident that the scheme which we're being asked to approve as part of this scheme was really of the same quality. There's also a concern about the pressure that there has been on some of the existing trees which are retained, and we want to do all we can practically to make sure that any retained trees of significance on the site had the best possible chance of continuing to thrive. So what we've done with consultation with our tree officer is suggest an additional condition, which we're calling a tree and landscape mitigation strategy. So that's condition 9 in the report. I'm not going to read it all out, but there's sort of a couple of elements to it. So the first element originally proposed was a revised landscaping scheme. So we're aware from discussions with the developer that some of the trees which were originally proposed to be planted in the original landscaping scheme can't be planted for technical reasons. That may well be the case, but we need to understand what those technical reasons are, and if they can't be planted where they were shown originally, then we would argue there's ample open space within the site, they could be planted somewhere else. So a revised landscaping scheme which brings us up to the required quantity and quality of planting that I think we all had in mind when the application was originally approved, and also to make sure that the landscaping scheme also suitably mitigates the loss of trees which have occurred during or post the development. To make sure that we can do to support the existing trees as well, the landscape officer has recommended that a scheme of works is drawn up to try and enhance those. So that could be things like injecting growth fertilisers for a non-technical term, but also additional mulching, watering, so on, to try and help those trees through and avoid the loss of any more trees. So that's the sort of second limb, and then the third limb was sort of enhanced management of the tree stock on the site over the 5 years. So that would include the new planting that's going in, but also additional care for the existing trees. So there was 3 essential limbs to the strategy. What we've got on the screen here is we've added an additional bullet in. So what we want to do is have a clear plan which identifies what additional trees have been removed from what we had originally envisaged when the planning permission was granted. So we have a clear record, and then that will allow us with our landscape officer to make sure the landscaping scheme and the enhancement scheme, the mitigation strategy, suitably mitigates for that. I'm very aware from what Councillor Abbott has said from previous planning committees that members always like to understand what the tree loss has been on any particular development or will be as a consequence of it. And I very much hoped we'd be able to present a table to detail what those changes were tonight. Unfortunately, that information hasn't been provided, which is so I'm unable to share it with you, and that's why we've amended condition 9, so we have that information for when we actually come to approve the strategy. And we've put on there as part of the condition that this information is to be provided to us within 2 months of a decision notice, so we can make sure that we have it in a timely manner, that we can plan for appropriate planting in the next planting season, and can manage things more positively going forward, and make sure that the quality of landscaping on the site is in accordance with what we expected originally. And then moving on to the last point I was going to cover in the presentation, the private amenity spaces. So the speaker at question time referred to some changes to the layout, which has impacted on the size of private amenity space. So this is a graphic taken from the design and access statement, which members may have seen. So the dark green colours show the properties, the homes, which have a 100% compliance. So they meet the minimum standard in the Essex Design Guide, or exceed them in a number of cases. And then you can see the key there. There's the sort of lighter green, marginally under, and then we're dropping down. So you can see all will have at least 70% of the minimum standard, but some are obviously lower than others. So this is obviously more difficult for us as officers and the council to mitigate. All the properties do have gardens, some have smaller gardens. That may be suitable for some people, but it may adversely affect some occupants. So what we've tried to do is find a different way to mitigate. So the officers that were dealing with the application originally and the planning development manager have negotiated the financial contribution with Bellway. So that was something that officers were keen to secure. And it follows an approach we've adopted on a previous site within the district where garden sizes were undersized. So a sum of £150,000 has been requested by officers and agreed by Bellway. The contribution is to be used for improvements to the town park. We're terming it as improvements to informal outdoor recreation facilities within the locality. The rationale for this would be that what we're trying to do is make the town park as attractive as possible for residents on the development, particularly those who have slightly undersized gardens. One of the ideas that the town council have had is to convert the existing toilet block, which is just inside. So this is King's Chase here. So this is the toilet block just through here, and the path sort of runs along here and sort of runs immediately along. So this is the development that you can see just behind this image here. This is a sort of mock-up image which the town council have produced. So the idea is that what they would like to explore, I should say, is the potential to convert the existing building, which is, like I say, just a public convenience at the moment, have a smaller but refurbished public convenience in part of the building. And then in the remainder of the building, there'd be a sort of coffee, ice cream, kiosk, tea bar, whatever you want to call it. This would be beneficial for a number of reasons. We think it would be beneficial to the community. It would provide an additional reason for residents and the wider community to go into the park. We think it would increase activity within the park. It should help deter antisocial behaviour by improving natural surveillance around the toilets. But in terms of linkages to the development, we very much see it as being an improvement to the locality, the park, around the development, and we think it helps to mitigate the impact of the development. When we wrote the report and published it on the agenda, unfortunately we didn't have the Town Council's comments. They've subsequently been received. We've just summarised it there. They've confirmed they consider the contribution to improve the town park to be acceptable, and they particularly welcome the contribution and the potential to use it towards converting the toilet block into a kiosk. I have to stress that this is an idea that the Town Council have, so it hasn't been technically tested in terms of feasibility. It would require planning permission as well, licences and so on. So we're certainly not presenting this as the money will only be used on this or that this will definitely happen. But I think it was important to share it with it because it's something the Town Council are very keen on as an idea. If it can't be this, then it would be other schemes within that part of the park to try and encourage informal recreation. So it could be sitting out areas and those sorts of things, I think, rather than maybe sports and those sorts of things which are already provided for. But the contribution is there, and like I say, the heads of terms we're saying the money would be used for informal outdoor recreation facilities. So in terms of key considerations, the development is fully built out and now occupied. there's a number of variations between the approved plans, which is application seeks to regularise. We've got no objections from statutory technical consultees, although we are outstanding a response from the SUDS team at Essex County Council, which I'll come back to in a moment. The appearance of the new homes varies from the approved plans, but overall is certainly considered to be acceptable. And as I've explained, there's the financial contribution, which will be secured by a supplemental legal agreement. So we are recommending approval recommending that members pass a resolution to grant the application, subject to the lead local flood authority confirming approval of the surface water drainage scheme and completion of a legal agreement to cover the heads of terms within the report. On the flood scheme, what's happened is, because there's been some layout changes, the SUDS drawings have changed slightly to reflect the layout changes. Bellway have assured us that the drainage scheme adheres to the approved scheme originally, but similar to Jack was explaining earlier, because we are potentially approving it, we just want confirmation from the local flood authority that they're satisfied that the changes are called, and we're not relying solely on the developer's word. So we're not expecting this to be an issue, but we do want to have that confirmation before we grant the permission. But subject to that recommendation, we'd ask members pass that resolution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and that's also with the amendment to condition 9 as set out in the report, isn't it? Yep. Members, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just before I make my comments, could I just ask officers how this breach was notified to the council? Was it done by the house builders themselves, or was it noticed by council officers?
It was by officers that it became to our attention.
Thank you, Neil. Madam Chairman, Bellway aren't a small local house building company with a small build-out rate. They're a national company that built almost 9,000 houses last year. They know what they need to do at a planning committee. They know what they're granted at a planning committee. And had it not been for council officers, I think they just think they can get away with stuff like this. For the 5 or 6 of us, I think, who went through this application 6 or 7 years ago, will fully understand how contentious it was to get planning permission on this site. So there should have been extra detail paid to the consent that was granted at the time. Whilst it's very good of the Speaker to come to us cap in hand this evening and offer their apologies, I'm afraid it doesn't wash with me tonight. We're backed into a corner whereby we can't really refuse because the site has been built out. And whilst I do concede that some of the changes have given some additional benefit to the build out, the fundamental reason still remains that they have deviated from the planning consent that this committee granted back then for the original permission. And that, for me, Madam Chairman, is a complete dereliction of duty as a house builder. As I said, they're not a small house builder, they're a large house builder. They know what they are doing. And whilst we also recognise that there's some additional recompense by way of additional section 106, I think that kind of flies in the face of the original application, understanding that the amount of green space that was going to be lost as part of that, which drew a lot of attention from the town council, a lot of attention from local residents of the amenity that has been lost through the delivery of that site. And now we again find ourselves arguing about the return of trees in this space. It's almost a double whammy here from a house builder who should know better. They've delivered houses in this area before. They're not new to this local planning authority or to the district, yet they think they're big enough to try and, on the sly, deliver houses in a complete deviation to the planning consent that has been given. I don't doubt that at some point this evening there will be one of us who moves the recommendation to grant the changes. that have been recommended by council officers. But I think we need to clearly state on record that for council officers to recognise this change and for Bellway to not have the forthright side to actually come to us in the first instance and say there has been some changes and we need to make a retrospective change. Can you assist us? I think is an absolute dereliction of duty. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Taken. Thank you very much, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with all of what Councillor Ritchie's just said. This was one of the most contentious planning applications in Witham for decades because of its location next to the town park, the high street, the sports grounds and the Riverwalk. And I always felt at the time that it was trying to do too much, and I think part of why we are here tonight is because it was trying to do too much. Had this come in for 40 or 50 houses, we could have avoided some of these pressures. Actually, I'm not so concerned about the changes to the house designs, although, as has been said, a volume developer, a national volume developer, should know you build to the plans. You don't just change them as you go along. And think, yeah, it sounds, because officers found out what was going on, that they were, had they not done so, Bellway would have just carried on. But my two main concerns are the lack of delivery of the appropriate garden sizes. I think that's a very serious matter. And it wasn't just a few houses, as the Speaker said, it was a substantial number of the houses have got substandard gardens. And then, of course, the trees. Jimson's was one of the most well-treed private pieces of land in Witham. I did just, at the time, there was all sorts of planning stuff flying around. And I did a survey where I took aerial photographs and looked at how many trees there were on that site compared to the rest of the town. It was probably the most well-treed private site, so excluding places like the Riverwalk. Almost all the trees were destroyed, and that was with the permission of Branch Council, which was because the application was trying to do too much. Had it come in at 40 or 50, a lot of those trees could be saved. Even trees around the edge of the site were cut down. And like on a lot of sites, I got photographic evidence of what happened. Not just the horrendous destruction of mature trees, which this council allowed, and the subsequent further destruction of trees that they were supposed to keep, but I've got photographs of they were working right underneath, or very close to, the roots and the spread of the TPO trees, which you're not supposed to do. They're supposed to have large tree protection zones to stop root compaction, damage, etc. So it will be very interesting to know, I don't know if it's going to come back to committee, how many more trees did they cut down than they were supposed to. I would, as the officer said, it'd be very interesting to know that. But my final question is, if this developer, and they have a track record of cutting down trees and hedges, I mean, thankfully this committee stopped them cutting down the one on the fronting Rickstones Road in Rivenel, but many other hedges and trees have come out. My question is, if they cut down TPO trees without consent, why did this council not prosecute?
Yeah, so in terms of the additional trees that were removed, as mentioned during the presentation, the project arboriculturist who was working for Bellway always, or as I understand it, always contacted the council's tree department or landscape services team prior to any TPO trees being removed. The trees that were being removed, the additional trees, there was evidence of disease on those, or that there was damage from storms, because it happened on a number of different occasions. So on each occasion, before the tree was removed, the project arboriculturist contacted the tree officer, explained the situation, gave them the opportunity to visit the site, and because there was a safety issue because of risk of failure, there wasn't an application made. The tree officer approved the tree removal for safety reasons and the replacement, and agreed replacement planting as a consequence of the tree being removed. So there weren't individual applications being made, but Bellway were operating through contact with the appropriate officers at the council, and did have approval for the removals before, because where they happened, they were being justified, so far as we are aware.
As has been previously said, sorry, I don't buy it.
Anybody else like to make any further comment on this application? In that case, Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman, and don't disagree with what Councillor Ritchie said. I read the report and I just thought first it's disappointing that Bellway, who are a national house builder and who we've worked with many times with applications that sort of allowed this to happen. But and yes, I agree. Quite a lot of the changes to the dwellings are either better or have had a neutral effect. But it is, I think, it's the garden spaces and so on that are the most damaging part to this. But there we are. Okay, so a sizable sum of money will go to the town council, and I'm sure they can work through the kiosk idea, which looks good, but that is, that's going to have to go down its own separate planning and change of use route and so on. And that will, in some way, I guess, make up for what has happened. But yeah, I remember this application very well. It aroused really strong feelings from local residents and also from the town council at the time. And I know the membership of that town council has changed a little bit over the years, but yeah, I got some very interesting emails at the time on this. So it's particularly ironic, I guess, that that this has happened with this particular development. Anyway, having said all of that, I will move officer's recommendation. I mean, there's, I think we have to accept it's happened. There is some mitigation here, and I think we do have a choice. But I'm going to move officer's recommendation. Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Spray. Before I just pass on to second, I just would also reiterate the points that have already been made and endorse them. But I do think, in addition to that, the design changes, we have specific requirements on design for a reason, and I don't think it's for the developer to just ignore them.
Absolutely,
so, thank you. And can I have a seconder for that, Councillor Holland? All those in favour of grant of officer's recommendation, approving officer's recommendation. All those against? Abstentions? That is granted. Thank you, members. So we'll now move on to the next item on our agenda. This is item 5D on the agenda. It is application number 25/01553 full. This is land adjacent to the solar park, as I'm going to call it, Kentish's Farm, Kentish Farm Road, Stystead, and that is on page 121 on your agenda. We do have a speaker on this, who's Mr. Khan, who's from the applicant. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Thanks for providing some time to discuss the proposal of this solar farm with a co-located battery energy storage system. Before we get into the project, I'd like to give you a bit of background about who we are. So my name's Andy Khan. I'm the Managing Director of Push. We're a local business. We've been operating since 2012, headquartered just down the A120 in Colchester. We're a family-owned business with farming roots. We understand the pressures that local farmers are under, and we specialise in renewable energy. We've successfully brought 4 projects across the UK, delivering enough solar energy to power over 100,000 homes to date. So as you've heard from the case officer, the proposed development is 16 megawatt solar farm with a co-located battery energy storage system, providing much needed capacity to deliver electricity during peak times or when the sun is not shining. The site will export the energy directly to the grid, helping to power thousands of homes and preventing the emissions of thousands of tonnes of CO2. So events around the world, which are ongoing at the moment, have clearly shown how important it is for the United Kingdom to produce more of its energy needs domestically. rather than relying on volatile international energy markets. Developing strong solar generation capability will help the UK move away from being a net importer of energy and to create greater energy independence. Doing so will not only improve long-term security in our energy, but also help stabilise and reduce energy costs for businesses and for households. However, that being said, we fully recognise that national objectives need to be balanced with local considerations. From the outset, our approach has been to design a scheme that integrates sensitively into its surroundings. The layout has been carefully developed to follow the natural contours of the land, retain existing hedgerows, and incorporate additional native planting to enhance biodiversity. The land at the site has been assessed as grade 3B, meaning that it's not considered best and most versatile agricultural land. In many cases, solar farms lead to an improved soil health and increased habitats for pollinators and wildlife when compared with intensive agricultural use. As a local company, we're also keen to ensure that community can feel connected to this project. During the construction phase, we'd welcome the opportunity to organise supervised visits for local residents so they can see firsthand how the site is built and how the technology works. We'd also like to engage with local schools to explain the role renewable energy plays in the UK's future, and, where appropriate, offer educational visits for students during construction, helping young people understand how energy is generated and inspiring the next generation of engineers, scientists and environmental specialists is something we believe is an important part of projects like these. So I'll make it quick, but thanks for your time, and I hope that gives you the information you need to grant us permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. So we'll now move on to presentations, which is going to be given by Melanie.
Good evening, members. The application I'll be sharing with you this evening is for the installation of a solar farm with battery energy storage and ancillary infrastructure, and this is adjacent to the existing solar farm at Kentish's Farm Road, Stystead. This first slide shows you the site layout. To put it in context, this is the A131, which just off of here is the traffic light junction in High Garrett, and then this is the turning that then runs up towards Housestead. This is the existing solar farm at the bottom here of the slide, and then we've got 4 parcels of land which will be shown as the 4 different parcels for the solar arrays. Apologies for this. About 4 weeks and counting now. The next slide hopefully puts the site in more context in terms of it's an aerial photograph, and this shows the existing solar farm in better context than the previous slide. We've also, so the 4 parcels of land run around in a circle to the top section here. We've also then got 2 wooded areas that are located within the centre of the application, and they will remain untouched by the application. As you can see on here, there are those 2 large wooded areas. I have got a slide later on in the presentation that does show you the number of public rights of way that run around the site. I'll show you that later in the presentation. The next slides show you in more detail the actual infrastructure and development that will appear on the site. So this is a zoomed in shot of parcel 4. At the bottom here is the battery storage area, so this is a permanent development. And then at the top here is the temporary construction compound, which will remain only in place whilst the development is being constructed, while it's being built out. The next slide show you elevations of some of the structures on the site. So we've got the comms cabinet here. We've got the details of the transformers, the containers. There's 2 containers going to be proposed on the site. This slide is the smart transformer station. These are the battery containers, often referred to as BESS. The next slide shows the power conversion system. These are the details of the actual solar arrays and their mounting arrangements. And lastly, this is the distribution transformer. This drawing here, this slide shows a section through one of the public rights of way. So it shows that the indicatives, most of the public rights of way, having walked most of them last summer, are quite well enclosed. Probably not so much at this time of year, but during the summer months especially, most of the public rights of way that's around the site, and some of my photographs will show that, they are very well enclosed by existing hedgerows and trees. These next two slides show details of two substations that are proposed for the site as well. This slide here shows the various public rights of way that run around the site and through the site. So this brown line marks the byway that runs through the centre of the site. This will also serve as the main construction point for construction traffic. We've also got a public right of way that runs to the northeast. We've got a bridle way as well, and then we've got another public right of way down to the south here. So the next few slides show various photographs from public viewpoints at various points around the site. So these are of parcel 4 from the byway, and you might not be able to make it out, but it does look like the end of the world, doesn't it? The cloud formation that day. On the horizon here, you can just make out the existing solar farm that this is an extension to. These are views of parcel 3, which are actually would be sited beyond these hedgerows, so not particularly visible from this public right of way. These are views from these are views of parcel 2 from the byway. So again, most of them have this kind of appearance where there are glimpsed views rather than solid views across the parcels of land. This is a view of parcel 1 from the bridle way. And again, these photographs show you the nature of the vegetation on either side of the bridle way. This is probably the most open views. These are further views of parcel 1 from the public right of way, and there is a section that is very open, as you can see from this bottom photograph. And again, further views of parcel 1 from the byway. I just wanted to provide some clarification on paragraph 12.2.3 in the committee report, which is actually page 162 if members wanted to refer to that, where it states that most of the site is not best and most versatile agricultural land. Officers wish to clarify that none of the site contains best and most versatile agricultural land, as set out in paragraph 11.1.8. The applicant's in-depth report concludes that all of the site is subgrade 3B. Best and most versatile land is graded 1 to 3A. The next slide shows some additional conditions. Bit of an oversight from me, so apologies. There were some landscape conditions that were missing. I don't propose to read out these, but there is the first condition here is the fairly standard condition where we're asking for full details of both hard and soft landscaping to be provided. Another one here to do with watering and maintenance, so again fairly standard wording that you would have seen before. And then a third condition here which requires the submission of a landscape and ecological management plan. These were all recommended by the landscape expert that was employed by the council, and as I say, a pure oversight on my part for not including them within the officer report and appendix. So, by way of a conclusion, officers consider that the application is compliant with the development plan and the planning balance falls in favour of granting planning permission. As set out within the officer report, there are limited harms in terms of landscape harm, loss of a small section of hedgerow, minimal impact on residential amenity and temporary highway impacts. In terms of benefits, there is up to 16.5 megawatts of renewable energy, and then further additional benefits of the BNG of habitat and hedgerow units, and some short-term construction employment. Therefore, the recommendation is to grant planning permission in accordance with the approved plans and documents and the conditions set out within the Appendix 1 and also those recommended within this slideshow. Happy to answer any questions, members.
Thank you, Melanie. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to first focus on the battery energy storage system, BESS. In section 4, there have been, as everybody realises, occasionally fires at battery storage sites, and one of the things that's a characteristic of those fires, they can't essentially be extinguished. They have to be allowed to burn out because they produce their own oxygen. As a result, what you need is a lot of water and good ways of managing water runoff in the event of such an occurrence. You also need to be able to get fire appliances to the BESS site, sometimes in number. The most recent one in Essex had 23 units at it, although it was a much bigger site than this. The site more in keeping with this, which there's a good fire report on, had half a dozen units were needed, and it took 60 hours to make the site safe again. Now, I'm not pretending for one moment that this is a regular occurrence, but it is a problem, and that's clearly flagged up by fire departments around and about, who are all having to increase investment, if possible, in order to be able to deal with this new issue. So my question is this: are we confident in making this decision that the water supply to the battery storage system for use in the unfortunate and unlikely event of a fire is adequate to the purpose of dealing with the problem? And secondly, are we confident that the road access to that BESS aspect of this site is adequate for fire engines to be able to arrive there and locate themselves within reasonably close proximity of the batteries? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Members will be aware that on page 128 of the committee report, Essex Fire and Rescue set out a fairly comprehensive set of comments in terms of requesting a fire risk reduction strategy, and they've set out a number of bullet points there in terms of what they would expect to see. Prior to coming to the meeting this evening, I did seek confirmation from the planning agent as to whether or not they would be able to fulfil all of those requirements. That has been confirmed in writing to me that they would be able to fulfil all those requirements, which then ties into condition 10, which is the fire risk management plan, which has been recommended. And what we would do at the time of that being submitted to us to be considered, we would consult the Essex Fire and Rescue for their comments on the application, like we would do with, if we'd received highways documentation or flooding documentation, we would then consult with the relevant expert. So I myself personally, I'm confident that the site can come forward and allay your fears, Councillor Holland.
I acknowledge and accept the answer you provided. What I can assure you of, that it doesn't give me personally confidence in making this decision. because it seems to me that there is, with this application, too much that's been left a little tiny bit late. We should be able to make decisions knowing that what we are consenting is deliverable, and that response is no adverse reflection on you, Melanie, or any of the work of our officers. It is a simple fact, as far as I'm concerned, that if I'm to give my support to a decision, I really do have to be confident that what is proposed is deliverable. And with this respect to this particular issue, I don't feel that it can at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Just to come back on that point, because it's a really important point, and we only have to look at what's happened with the fire in Glasgow, how these things can take hold and take a lot of effort to try to address. So it's something we are acutely aware of. It's something with the growing number of these types of applications that have been coming forward, that as an officer team we have been seeking to try to engage with the fire service. The fire service are very much engaging with us and providing comments on the applications. I think the comfort that I suppose the additional comfort I can try to give members this evening or in relation to this is because the condition is a pre-commencement condition. We've got the assurance, I suppose, in terms of the response from the fire service. We've got an assurance as far as we can from the applicant side. The detail of that would come forward by way of condition, and it would then be for the details of that to be confirmed to be satisfactory before anything could happen. If we get to a stage where that was not the case, obviously there's a reason why we're saying that that the development can't advance past that stage. So that hopefully provides an extra level of comfort on that point, because we recognise it, you know, it is a serious point, and yeah, given the obviously the location of the site, how you access it and so forth, but we have to go on the basis of the consultation responses that we have as an officer team. But just to give you some assurance around the wording of the condition, that puts a line in the sand that we need to make sure that detail is satisfactory before it could then carry forward.
Chris, can I just ask myself in relation to Councillor Holland's point here? So it's condition 10.
Yeah.
Will you be seeking advice from the Essex Fire Service when that fire risk management plan is I noticed that you're nodding, and I noticed that there isn't any reference in there. I know it's should include, so presumably it doesn't. It could also include other things, but there's no reference there to supply of water. So it's just a bit concerning that that's not actually picked up in there.
So, Councillor Parker, apologies. So, one of my apologies. That's an omission on our side. So, would be very happy to substitute the word should for shall, because we want those details to come forward. So, if that deals with that particular point, and apologies in terms of the detail of it, you were referring to the water. Apologies, let me just go back to the wording of the report. Perhaps if I could just come back to you on this point, if that's okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in order to add to Chris Paggy's woes, there's another thing that I don't think the responses I've received have chased off, and that is to go back to, I think it was a Liverpool fire, once again in a fairly small scale, best unit, these sorts of proportions we're talking about tonight. As I said earlier, it took 60 hours to put out, but I also mentioned in my question the fact that the runoff from any such event is problematic, and in order for members to understand that, I should tell you that 60 hours worth of water being run onto these battery units resulted in water runoff which contained hydrogen fluoride and significant amounts of hydrochloric acid. Obviously, and given the proximity to important assets such as an ancient woodland and what have you, I'm very keen that any such runoff pollution is contained. This is not impossible to do and should not get in the way of rolling out this sort of site. But it does need thinking about. And this district has another enormous BESS facility coming forward in the north of the district. And that has to have a large lagoon and fairly significant management for this issue, forming part of the proposal which will eventually come before us. So I can't see from this how that particular issue is being handled. And so I would therefore also be asking for reassurances that this issue will be handled. And I'm not personally sure that this issue is a fire department. I don't think this is an issue for necessarily just for the fire department as a statutory consultee. I think there's a significant environmental issue here. I'd certainly be interested in whether other members feel the same disquiet on this. Thank you.
So, okay, we'll move on to another question. I think Chris is looking at those points. So I think the next person on my list is Councillor Bowers, you wanted to. Oh, whoever's going to go first. Councillor Bowers-Flint, are you going to go first?
He didn't want to speak, apparently. That's quite a long list there from Essex Fire and Rescue. In fact, I would hesitate to say that it's the longest list that I've actually seen come in front of members. So with that, I would feel more reassured that all of those requirements are listed into a condition and not just generalised, because it's really important. And when you hear Councillor Holland mentioning 25, 26 vehicles, commonly known as a 26 pumper fire, that's a lot of vehicles to accommodate, especially in an area like this. So I would feel, although the applicant has said that they're quite happy to do it, that's fine, but I think that they definitely, because I've never seen such requirements from the Essex Fire and Rescue, I would feel more reassured that they are actually listed in the condition. And also, following on from Essex Fire and Rescue is Essex Police and their requirements, and they're asking for security measures including fence choices, incorporation of hedge planting to be integrated into the security, use of CCTV, which is quite popular in solar farms, and that combined with an audio capability that it should be linked to a monitoring station. And then also, given the increase in crime-related solar farms, because there is crime-related regarding solar farms, that they're asking the applicant to engage with their Designing Out Crime Office, which again gives really good advice and sensible advice. So I would suggest that the applicant would do that. But it's this fire of where the location is, and it's all of these requirements. That is one long list from Essex Fire and Rescue, and they don't do things like that lightly. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Chris is going to come back now on those points. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just picking up points from that Councillor Holland raised and Councillor Bowers-Flint. So I think our approach here. So the fire service certainly has given a long list of requirements which are set out within paragraph 7.71 of the committee report under their consultation response. I couldn't compare it directly, but the last solar farm proposal that we had, which was elsewhere in the district, I think we had similar conversations and there were similar requirements. I couldn't say for sure whether or not they're exactly the same or are these potentially more onerous requirements. However, the wording of the condition in the agenda paper matches what we tried previously, which was around a strategy. And there was a lot of discussion at the time over the wording of that condition between officers and the fire authority. And I think that's why we've tried to take the same approach here. But I think, being mindful of the concerns that have been raised by members, my suggestion this evening would be that if members are minded to resolve to grant permission, we take away to amend the wording of condition 7 to, as suggested by Councillor Bowers-Flint, to look at incorporating the detailed points that have been raised with the fire service. We could take that back and agree that with Chair, Vice Chair, move for seconder if we get to that stage this evening. However, as it's also a pre-commencement condition, we would need to get approval from the applicant, which we're required to do as a matter of course. So given the number of items, I think we'd probably want to work on the wording of the condition. We can finesse that. And then if we get to that stage and make sure everybody's happy, because I think I think there's an agreement over the importance of this issue. Certainly we recognise that as an officer team. And as I said, we are engaging increasingly with the fire service around these types of proposals, recognising the risks that present themselves, and we've also been working with colleagues elsewhere in the authority around business continuity and providing feedback through those routes as well for the fire service. So that would be my suggestion: is we could take the wording of the condition away. So if members are minded to grant, we work up the wording of the condition that takes account of those bullet points, finesse the wording so it would still be a strategy, but more explicitly setting out the individual elements that would be expected. So that would be my suggestion.
I think, Madam Chair, through you, one of the important points here is that this is not just a solar farm, it's also a BESS station, and that rather changes the risk profile of this type of development. That's the reason for my concern. And so strategies we come forward with in the past for solar farms alone, which is just solar PV, would not necessarily cover off all of the issues on a site, which is a hybrid such as this.
I think that's a sensible suggestion, Chris, as the way forward. I think it is condition 10, not condition 7.
Apologies. Yes, sorry. Yes, it's paragraph 7 points. Yes,
okay.
It's condition 10. You're absolutely
condition
right.
10.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah.
Okay, so the next person is Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Bowers-Flint touched on a number of points that I was going to make, but no, it's fine. Thank you for picking them up. But just to pick up on a few of them, the Essex County Fire and Rescue have made a number of recommendations here, and I think some of the early ones in the on page 128, some of the important ones that we shouldn't lose sight of. And some of that is installation of an automatic fire and carbon monoxide detection system and VESDA systems, which are very early detection of smoke, and a suppression system. Now, when a BESS fire starts to establish, the first thing you need to do is to cool, which is why they've recommended putting in a fire suppression system. So it's not about getting the fire service out of the beds and into a pump truck and to the site. It's about control of a fire condition at the early onset, and the treatment of that fire at the early onset can often avoid it escalating into an established fire, which is why they've quite rightly, over the progression of BESS installations, come up with some recommendations here whereby they can control the spread of fire and the causation of the fire to try and limit the effect of that fire. And I think it'd be wrong for us to push too hard against what the experts are saying here, when they've clearly labelled out what they want to do. And then if you look further down there as well, they've also stipulated there should be provision and access to sufficient water supplies for manual firefighting with a minimum provision of up to 1900 litres per minute for 2 hours. So when you link that to the fire suppression system that will be in each of those BESS units, alongside a minimum delivery of provisioned water separate to what they will bring, you have the necessary controls in an application like this. I wouldn't want to push too hard against what some experts are saying here with regards to what's in a planning, in this planning application, bearing in mind that once they've done all that, there's also a bullet point here that says that there should be adherence to the fire safety order. Now, the fire safety order comes under building regulation, so they're not going to get that signed off. All of those points will not be signed off until it's been checked by an approved inspector. Therefore, I think what that does do is give us sufficient assurances that there will be enough mitigation in place with VESDA systems and early fire suppression systems to give us the confidence that they've covered every single base when it comes to tackling a rare occurrence of a BESS fire in a containment like this. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I think the proposal is to thoroughly engage with the experts, i.e. the fire service. So the next person is Councillor Bevis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to thank Push for their presentation. I seem to recall over the years I have come across Push before, and some of the work they've done and their links to our farming community. So I wanted to firstly thank them for the presentation. I'm not wholeheartedly happy with the report, and I sort of chime with Councillor Holland that for me it just feels a little bit rushed, and I'm not really sure why. I'd rather personally see the application deferred and come back and get some of this right. And I appreciate and accept some of the comments that have already been made, but I'm really quite worried about the natural habitat of this area. I know the area quite well, actually, and there are an awful lot of deer in this area, and that's not really been mentioned throughout the report. There is also a lack of evidence on the badger sets. And when you look at, I think it's condition 5 and then condition 7, condition 5 talks about the, I think it's the greater crested newt, and then condition 7 goes on, no, condition 6, beg your pardon, goes on to talk about the farmland and the bird compensation strategy. But there's nothing there about badgers, and there's nothing there about deer. There's nothing about bats, actually, which has really surprised me. And I just feel that those conditions 5 and 6 aren't strong enough, and I just don't think they represent wholly the landscape of the area. And I don't know what Chris can do about that, but I really do believe that the condition needs to be strengthened, because it doesn't even mention, you know, bats, badgers, deer. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bevis, for the question. I'll bring Mel in a second, because she'll be more familiar with the ecology reports and what was assessed in detail. But essentially, coming to condition 5, first of all, so the great crested newts point. So the application has been reviewed by one of our ecologists in terms of advisors. We have had specialist advice. The wording for condition 5 is the wording, our standard wording of condition in relation to great crested newts. So I'm unclear in terms of how we can strengthen that further. That would be the standard wording that we would impose. So there is consistency with that. Similarly, the condition 6 in terms of the farmland bird compensation strategy, again, we've used this on a number of occasions, and again, it's been recommended by the ecologist in this case. So I don't think, from our perspective, that we would be able to suggest any wording that strengthens either of those two things. But clearly, what's set out in the report and what's been undertaken here is we've assessed the ecological impact of the proposal and deemed it to be acceptable based on the specialist advice that we've received in those regards. I'll ask Mel in a second to comment specifically on badgers, if that's okay, to see whether or not that formed part of the assessment. But just on the deer point, again, Mel will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a point we did clarify with our ecologist. So I think deer are technically, while important, species within wildlife in ecological terms, they're not actually a protected species. Obviously, they're not regarded in the same way, say, great crested newts or ground nesting birds in that sense. So we wouldn't expect to see those types of protections. It's not invading the habitat, so there's a standoff from the woodland and so forth. And obviously the solar farm is primarily proposed on open fields. In terms of bats, again, I'll ask Mel just to clarify that point, if I can, in terms of the assessment, but primarily in terms of badgers, if that's okay.
Thanks, Chris. So I would draw members' attention to page 152 of the committee report, and particularly paragraph 11.7.5, where I can just read it all out if you'd like me to read it out to you. Basically, it sets out the ecological impact assessment that was submitted as part of the application, it says that this is necessary to conserve and enhance protected and priority species, particularly those recorded in the locality. Therefore, the proposed measures during the construction phase should be finalised via the submission of a construction environmental management plan, which let me just have a look. One of those is requested at condition 4. Thank you, Jack. 4, yes. I like my paper. So that has been covered by that condition, which will be secured via a pre-commencement condition. This would set out biodiversity protection zones, both to do with the ancient woodland and the badger sets. And I think in terms of ancient woodland, because of the nature of bats and where they would live, that would be covered by the inclusion of that wording, ancient woodland. And then these would set out protection zones during the construction phase, during best practice mitigation measures and pre-commencement surveys. The next paragraph then goes into specific detail about the conditions requested for great crested newts and farmland bird mitigation strategy. So the report does cover badgers and bats. And as Chris mentioned, we did get clarification from the council's ecologist with regards deer and the deer fencing that's proposed, and they are considered an invasive species given the vast numbers that roam the countryside. And he felt confident that there wouldn't be an ecological objection to the siting of the deer fencing where it runs around each of the parcel areas.
Next person is Councillor Shreer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I agree with the comments that Councillor Ritchie has been making about the expertise and the fire with regards to sort of the early fire suppression systems, and also I think the way of treating the very rare occasions of fire. Could I ask officers, because my understanding is that actually now, with regards to battery energy storage systems, that the fire brigade, should there in the rare occasion be a fire, that they don't actually attempt to put it out, because what happens, my understanding is again that the batteries are built in cells and each cell is self-contained and fireproofed, so that a cell will burn without and the idea is to potentially just cool what is next to it, right? So there isn't this idea of having two lakes poured onto a battery that will then potentially cause pollution. So I think you'll find that if you were to consult the experts, and my understanding is this, and I can't back it up because you need to ask the experts, but you don't actually treat the fire, you let it burn, and it's in a division of cells, fire protected. You're just there to ensure that it won't spread, and that's the whole advantage of fire suppression systems and the expertise that the fire brigade are now looking at, and the way that the technology is moved on to actually manage these batteries and the energy within them. So I think you'll find that that's been greatly reduced. I just wondered if they knew about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swift, for the question. So, from what you say, I can't really challenge, confirm, deny what you've said. But I think quite clearly, we're getting advice here from the fire service over the provisions that are required in this case. So I don't really have much further to add on that front, other than it does sound correct in terms of what you're saying, but I couldn't confirm definitively whether or not that's the case because I simply don't know the answer, I'm afraid.
Councillor Abbott, over you next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And yes, just to say, I do agree with all the discussions around making sure it's as safe as possible. You know, a solar farm on its own is one thing, but significant battery storage obviously does need very careful consideration in terms of safety and preventing fires. I wanted to come at this from a sort of higher level, really, in terms of scale. So it's 29.5 hectares, and I've been an advocate of renewable energy since the 1980s, but the concern I have, particularly, well, not just in the south of the district, actually, more broadly in the district, is the amount of farmland we are covering in solar panels, roads, pylons, housing, industrial estates, quarries, etc., etc. Because, and I think we've spoken about this before, it speaks to the dilemma we have in this country of we've got all these competing interests. You know, we need to produce more homegrown energy, which the applicant absolutely rightly said. We also need to produce more homegrown food. So where does the balance lie? Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. In terms of security, I did read in the report it is going to have infrared CCTV, so that's good because it doesn't need visible light, and the definition on infrared cameras is really good now. I know because we've got one near our back door and we watch the cat coming in and out, and I know their ones will be a lot more expensive and fancy, but it's amazing how much detail they have. This one does have the advantage that there is no best and most versatile agricultural land. It's 3B and lower, so we're not talking about loss of 2 or 1 here, which is better, but it is still lots of farmland. I don't know if the officer mentioned it, but there is some loss of hedging, 2 12-metre sections, but then I'm happy on this one that there is going to be substantial mitigation planting, and it's not like on these housing developments where we're losing entire frontages, and the BNG is quite positive. Going back to the sort of high level discussion, so it's often said by those who don't know what they're talking about that renewable energy doesn't work. You can get, I don't know if anyone's got them, you get these apps which tell you each day how much renewable energy this country is generating. And even during the winter, on breezy nights, we're now up to 60% of our entire grid is being powered by renewable energy. That's wind on its own. On a good breezy day in the summer, we're soon going to be up to 70% plus, and as more and more renewable energy comes on stream, that's going to go higher. Some countries in Europe now are getting near to 100% on the good days, and I appreciate the average is lower than that, but just to say, we will get to the point eventually where we will have days where all our electricity is renewable, which is fantastic, and storage is part of that. So it is a bit of a balancing act. I do support this application as a whole, but the final point I wanted to raise, which Councillor Bevis and others have raised, is the wildlife impacts. And I think for me, the one thing that I don't like about this is the way in which that ancient woodland is surrounded by solar panels. And connectivity for ancient woodlands is a really important thing. And it's difficult at this scale to see, I mean, you can see little strips around it, but you've got the existing solar farm there below it. Is that right? A bit in the middle. So that is effectively surrounded by solar. And I think we should try in future possibly to avoid that and allow the woodland, if you like, to breathe, see out into the countryside and not be surrounded. But that having said that, that's not going to stop me from supporting the application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor, but I think that is a fair point. Councillor Spray, and just want to make a couple of comments myself as well. So Councillor Spray first.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've had a really good discussion on this evening, and personally, and obviously not everybody has to agree, I think given the huge amount of work that the officer, Mel, has put into this very detailed report, given the assurances that we've received from officers and from the experts, in particular the fire service, about this, I think this committee ought to be in a position to make a decision on this evening. I'm absolutely against deferral. I don't see what that would achieve other than delay. We've had a good discussion on it, and personally I would like to move officers' recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Before I call for a seconder, I just would like to make a couple of questions myself. Mel, just on the yeah, I'm a member of the committee, Councillor Basford. I'm entitled to
That's correct, but when you have a proposal, you then get a seconder.
Okay,
Alison
sorry.
will advise on that.
All right, Councillor Basford seconded. Could I just ask Mel, on the landscaping condition, is there a requirement for the developer to plant any of the hedging before the development is before construction of the site starts? Only because I have certainly a site in my ward where the landscaping was planted afterwards, and it takes a long time, obviously, for that landscaping to develop. And the second question really is the again related to experiences I have in my own ward on the construction management plan, because if there can be, I appreciate that a construction management plan has to come forward, but can please attention be placed particularly to Rain Hatchwood Road, which is a very narrow single track road, and if that plan could make sure that there is provision to make sure that the verges on that road are not damaged by the construction traffic. So just those two questions, please.
Okay, so I can come back to you. So I've just brought the slide up with one of the additional conditions on, and I'll just read it because I'm not very good at paraphrasing. So I'm not going to read all of it, don't worry. I'm just going to read the first bit. I could see the panic in your eyes. Prior to any above ground works, full details of both hard and soft landscaping works, including tree planting, and an implementation programme, including early implementation of boundary planting linked to the proposed the development schedule, shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the LPA. So when Chris and I were looking at the wording of this earlier, the reason we've included both the implementation programme, so we can see a timeline of when planting is going to happen, but we've also then included the wording there, early implementation. So if there is boundary treatment that can go in before the development has then been constructed. In a lot of cases on housing sites, you wouldn't have the planting going in at the same time because they're likely to be damaged. But there may well be some of the boundaries of this site where some of the planting can go in before full construction starts. So that's why that wording has been included at the beginning of that suggested condition 32. In terms of your question about the construction management plan, which is construction management plan. So that's worded in condition 9. What would I do without? One of the bullet points within that construction management plan condition refers to measures to manage the routing of construction traffic. Would you consider that would be sufficient? So I think it's the third bullet point down in condition 9 that deals with the routing of construction traffic. I think from memory within the submission documents, that road off of the 131 and then the byway is proposed to be the main route into the site. And I'm aware it is fairly narrow and it's quite well treed on some sides as well. We can increase or we can add extra provisions into that condition if that's something that members would want to see.
Could I just suggest, having had this experience with this other development in my ward and having to have to liaise quite a lot recently with members of parish council, that it would be possible to have some kind of reference to a holding area? I think the problem arises when two construction vehicles, like for instance the vehicles that are bringing the aggregate to construct the roads are meeting at the same time on that road. So if it's possible to put something to words to that effect in there, just so that it can manage that traffic a bit better.
That bullet point, probably loud enough anyway without the microphone. In terms of how that bullet point is worded, it does say measures to manage the routing of the construction vehicle, and in my opinion that would cover vehicles travelling to the site but also leaving the site. So I would expect to see to kind of tick that box. We would have that information submitted.
So not to contradict what Mel's just said, so I agree with that. But again, we're in members' hands over that. The only comment would be we could tweak it so we could introduce additional wording to holding area. We can make it specific in terms of Rainhatch Road, if members would like. The only thing, similarly to the fire strategy, is because it is a pre-commencement. I think we just need to run that by the applicant as well. But again, if members are happy with the approach of the fire in terms of we reword the condition and get that agreed as a resolution, we'd be able to do that. I think the only point, Councillor Parker, I would just make is obviously in terms of the verges, ultimately the Highway Authority, if it's part of the highway network, the Highway Authority would be responsible rather than the District Council in terms of enforcing that. So the purpose of this condition is all about trying to mitigate as far as possible we can from a planning side, which I appreciate is difficult given the nature of the rural road network and particularly in this location. So, yeah, these provisions are essentially trying to help.
Personally, Chris, I would quite like to see that just tightened up a little bit to try and stop overlapping traffic, only because the experience I'm having at the moment, and we are getting enforcement officers involved, it'd be much better if it made clear at the outset exactly what was expected in terms of to try to prevent, to mitigate problems caused by the traffic, if that's okay. So that has been, would anybody, other members wish to make any comments then? No, it's been moved by Councillor Spray, seconded by Councillor Bowes-Flint, that this application is granted. Yes?
Can I just clarify that your point is included within the motion?
I'm not happy because I think what is in there is sufficient, so I wouldn't accept it.
Right, okay, well, I will withdraw that then if you don't want to have that, members. What, yeah, Councillor Spray?
I think if officers of Chris, if you're happy that what we have in there is sufficient, but I mean, obviously there can be further discussions with the applicant and I assume with highways. Yeah.
Councillor Spray, we're in your hands, so it's obviously members' decision this evening. So we can amend the wording of the condition, but that's a decision for members.
I would agree with the seconder. I think we leave it. Let's leave it as it is. Yeah.
I see no point because there is no way that you could police it anyway. And if the verges get disturbed and broken up, as they do on all of these things, then they have to put them back as they were. And county highways make them do that.
Fine. So in that case, we just have the only one we're going to look at is condition 10 on the fire risk. Okay, so all those in favour of officer's recommendation. Okay, members. Those against? Abstentions? One abstention. Okay, thank you, members. That's been granted. So now we move on to the next application this evening. This is item 5E on the agenda. It's application number 25/02458 REM, land south of Bovingdon Road, Braintree, and this is at page 185 of the agenda. We have no speakers, so I'm going to move on. Janine's going to give a presentation. Sorry. Sorry, members, I think slight technical issue.
Sorry about that. Sorry. This application is for a reserved matters application in respect of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, pursuant to the outline planning permission reference 21-02034 OUT, which was granted on the 9th of December 2022 following an appeal. The outline planning permission was with all matters reserved apart from access for up to 70 dwellings and associated development. This is a location plan of the site. As you can see on the eastern side, obviously this is Peter Taylor Avenue. To the north of the site is just open countryside. To the south, obviously, you've got the River Pant, and again to the west, obviously, you've got agricultural land. Bovingdon Road lies to the north of the site. And obviously, the principle of residential development has been established, as I said, on the outline permission. In terms of the proposed site plan, if you can see my cursor, there's kind of like distinct areas. So to the west, these would be a mix of bungalows and two-storey properties. To the centre, again, two-storey and bungalows, two-storey houses and bungalows, and again, two-storey houses here. To the eastern part, overlooking the attenuation basins, these would be three-storey blocks of apartments with two-storey houses in between, and again, three-storey apartment blocks, which kind of relates to Peters Taylor Avenue at the bottom. There would be a footpath linking the site to Peter Taylor Avenue, obviously linking it towards Bocking. The vehicle access, as I said, has already been established and was not objected to at outline stage. To the north, the applicant has sought to retain a landscape buffer, whereby there would be like a play area here, the open space, and again, attenuation basin. The trees along here, which I will come on to shortly, a lot of these are going to be retained, but part of this hedge here would be removed due to visibility. In respect to highways, no objections have been raised, and in respect to flood risk, no objections have been raised from the lead local flood authority. To conclude, the site layout is clearly legible, providing a clear delineation between the bungalows to the west, raising to two-storey in the centre, and then obviously the three-storey blocks towards the east. And obviously there are quite clearly tree-defined streets, which is obviously enhancing the overall landscape of the area. In terms of the street elevations, as I said, the proposed high massing from west to east is the bungalows. So this would be the bungalows view here. The street GG, which is at the bottom of the slide, would be in this central position. And then EE would be to the southern part of the site. Another street elevation, street scene elevation. So HH would be opposite the attenuation basin, which is here. You've got the street elevation, which is in the middle here. And again, obviously, you can see, you know, the applicant has sought to ensure that all frontages are active, including fenestration proportions. Again, this would be to the eastern side of the plot, whereby you've got the front elevation AA, which would be facing to the north to Bovingdon Road. Street elevation BB would be facing the attenuation basin in the middle here. And then obviously street elevation DD is just the side elevation. There's a few more images here. So these are the proposed bungalows. While simple, they have gable features, good-sized openings and canopy entrances to the porches. Again, these are the semi-detached two-storey houses, simple with different materials including render and brickwork and canopy entrances. The sawtooth line gable features. This has been referenced on the detached properties, and then obviously the three-storey apartment blocks to the eastern side. In terms of landscaping, this slide shows the landscaping plan envisaged for the proposed development. And it should be noted that there are no tree preservation orders on any existing trees on the site. As you will note in the committee report, there are 7 trees to be removed, which are category C or U, i.e. poor condition. And in addition to that, as I said earlier, the roadside hedge, part of that, where my cursor is now, is to be removed due to visibility splays. Landscaping services at outline planning permission stage raised no objection, subject to addressing loss of vegetation on the frontage along Bovingdon Road and replacement planting to mitigate for the loss of trees within the site. In addition, the planning inspector raised no objections in respect to the harm caused by any removal of the trees or the hedges. Landscaping services have fully assessed the application and acknowledged that there are no objections to the tree removal, which has been fully justified, and that the proposed development is unlikely to have any lasting impact on the existing retained trees, and the planting of 54 new trees is welcomed. However, the submitted information has not namely considered the impacts of the surfacing. So, for example, landscaping have raised concerns about a number of trees in close proximity to the play area where my cursor has been showed, and associated footpaths within that play area, whereby the submitted information is not in accordance with the British standards at this time. But it should be noted that no objections have been raised in relation to the siting of the residential development in terms of the houses or the apartment blocks or the roads at this time. In response to this, the agent has confirmed that following the determination of this application this evening, they would appoint a contractor to ensure that the site layout protects existing trees in accordance with the British standards. In addition, the arboricultural method statement would be updated, including a project arboricultural consultant during the course of the construction of the development to ensure full tree protection measures are provided to ensure the retention of existing trees in accordance with the British standards. Landscaping services have recommended a suitable condition as secured by condition 2 on page 217 of the committee report to ensure that prior to the commencement of any development, an updated arboricultural impact assessment and detailed tree protection plan should be provided in accordance with the British standards to address any outstanding concerns. As I said, the current application is accompanied by this landscaping strategy, which would include 54 new trees with a mix of native and ornamental trees. To ensure we have the full details and ensure that the species are relevant for this site, we are seeking a full landscaping condition to be provided as condition 11 set out in the committee report. Officers are therefore of the view, subject to securing conditions in respect of the updated tree information and the full landscaping details, the proposal would provide a development benefiting from tree-lined streets and well thought out amenity spaces. In respect of ecology, the site is not subject to any statutory or non-statutory designations, and the ecologist has raised no objection to the submitted information. In respect of the photos, this is the access to the site from the north, looking west along Bovingdon Road. The north of the site with the view obviously of the vehicle access in sight. The northwest of the site, obviously as you can see that's where the play area would be proposed. The west, east of the site, and as I said, obviously the applicant has sought to ensure a buffer is kept to the north to maintain the views of the Grade 1 listed church. And as I said, the eastern side of the plot, referring back to the site plan, you can see in the distance, obviously there's 3-storey apartment blocks. And this is the south of the site. And to conclude, the residential development has been established under an outline planning permission. It proposes 70 dwellings. As part of the original Section 106, there was a requirement to provide 30% affordable housing, but the applicant is now providing 100% affordable housing, exceeding the policy requirements. The development is considered to respond to the site boundaries, the approved access point, and creates a legible layout, and the appearance and scale of the development is acceptable. Views have been maintained to the northern part of the site to ensure that the Grade 1 listed church, St Mary's, is visible. and only the playground or open space and visitor parking and landscaping would be to that northern boundary. The development provides sufficient access and parking availability, including electrical vehicle parking and cycle provision. The proposal would include significant landscaping plan, including new trees, shrub and hedge planting, as well as a SUDS designed scheme with the intention of maximising the biodiversity. The proposal would not give rise to any undue impact on existing residential amenity, given the separation distances, and there are a number of sustainability measures, including photovoltaics and air source heat pumps proposed. Officers consider that the proposed appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of the development is acceptable in planning terms, subject to the recommended conditions contained in the report. It's therefore recommended to approve this reserve matters application, subject to the conditions and reasons listed on page 217 to 225 of the committee agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Members. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you. The track record of this applicant is absolutely diabolical with regard to landscaping. I can quote a site in Councillor Abbott's Warden, who will be very well aware of it, that has had the trees planted twice and there is now no longer any trees again. It's been landscaped 3 times in 3 years and again nothing there. It's just barren land. And last year a resident and I actually cleared part of the site ourselves because we were sick of looking at it. So anything that this applicant says about landscaping, I actually literally take with a pinch of salt, because it looks absolutely fantastic on paper and it looks fantastic the day the developer leaves the site. And from then on, it looks a mess. Thank you.
Anybody else? In which case, does anybody want to move officer's recommendation if nobody else wants to say anything? Janine, could you just confirm whether Councillor Bowes-Flint's concerns are going to be covered in the conditions? And
yeah, thank you. We have obviously got the standard conditions to ensure that landscaping is fully provided, and obviously the 5-year scheme as well. And we would ensure, as I said, the species are relevant to the site. Obviously, then it would just be up to the management of the site.
Neil?
Yeah, if I can just add to what Janine's answer, I think in light of Councillor Bowes-Flint's comments, the enforcement team now have a compliance monitoring officer. So what we can do is we can feedback Councillor Bowes-Flint's comments to the compliance officer so that when they start on site, she can make them aware of the council's concerns, and we can perhaps try and proactively monitor the site through planting more strongly perhaps than we have on other sites, given the concern that's been expressed. So I can't guarantee the outcome will necessarily be ideal, but we can try and act on the concern that's been expressed. So we can do that if that's helpful.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I will be grateful of that. And Mr Jones is well aware of where I'm talking about, and he's actually seen it with his very own eyes. And he done his hardest to try and get it amended. It was replanted, as requested by the officers here, and it was immediately left to die again. And the company that they used to do their grass cutting and that, when I challenged the guy on the gang mower, he said, we don't get paid enough to get off our mowers and do it by hand, so we just cut across the top of the shrubs. They do it openly, and they've done that 3 times now. So, and I have spoken to the chief executive of that a long while ago about their standard, and she agreed with me.
Councillor Abbott?
Yeah, just to reiterate that point, I think we do see a lot of plans like this from developers which have a lot of green ink on them. But the reality is, those of us who have wards where we have massive amounts of housing developments going on, are that a lot of the trees are dead sticks or half dead sticks. I'm involved with a lot of tree planting projects in Rivenhall and Silver End on a volunteer basis with colleagues, and the last several years it's been really hard to get hedges and trees to take because of we seem to be getting these wetter winters and then very dry summers, and you have to water, you have to make sure the soil's right, you have to mulch, and these trees and shrubs have been planted on building sites which become dust bowls in the summer with vehicles running up and down, dust in the air, not enough watering, and a lot of the planting doesn't stand a chance. And the one I particularly would draw attention to is the person on site, the 250 at Ty Green. I mean, hopefully they will get established eventually. You know, obviously I want them to, because they'll make a big difference to the residents as well. But it is a point worth reiterating that taking trees out is so easy to do with chainsaws, but getting them re-established is very difficult. Anyway, talking about the scheme itself, you know, given where we are, that it's got permission on appeal, it is 100% affordable, which is a good thing. It's the second one tonight where we've had a promise of photovoltaics and heat pumps on, I think, every house, or most of them, which is rare, so I think we ought to flag that. That's a good thing. Technically, it's a brownfield site. I do have some concerns about what Landscape said about they're not happy with some of the details. But overall, subject to that point about the landscaping actually getting to the point where it's establishing, I could support this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Okay, it doesn't look like anybody else wants to make any comments on this application. Could I have somebody to move the application, officer's recommendation? Councillor Holland, seconder, please. Councillor Ritchie. All those in favour? Okay, that application's been granted. So now move on to a final application this evening. This is application item number 5F on your agenda. This is application number 25/02678 out. Land rear of 112 London Road, Braintree. This presentation is going to be given by Jack. I am aware that it's 5 to 10, so we'll keep an eye on the clock. We don't have any speakers, so I'll just hand over to Jack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application is outline permission 25/02678/OUT. It's outline application with all matters reserved except for matters of scale and layout for up to, for 20 dwellings, sorry. Matters of appearance, scale and landscaping would therefore remain reserved matters. The site is shown here with a red line boundary and its relationship to the surrounding context. The site does fall outside of the Braintree development boundary. However, a recent draft decision under local plan subcommittee sought to realign the development boundary to include the site. That wasn't an allocation for housing, as members of that committee were concerned about noise impacts given the proximity to the A120, which I'll show shortly. And that is subject to regulation 18 and 19 stages. But nonetheless, the intent behind that realignment, in my opinion, is clear. It's a sustainable location as assessed in the officer's report. Technically, as it's not within the development boundary, it would fall within the countryside. However, as the image shows, it's not countryside in the traditional sense. It's very much enclosed by housing development to the north, development in the north of the site, housing to its east, and the A120 to the south. So this image shows how the site is visually contained. It also shows that relationship to the A120 and its surrounds. The proposed block plan, as noted, access and layout is not reserved, so the proposed access point would be between numbers 96 and 98 London Road. It forms a cul-de-sac arrangement with dwellings lining both sides of the single internal road. Officers have no objection to the principle of the access, but officers' concerns lie with the layout. So the site layout plan, the difference here being it shows landscaping, although that would be indicative as it's reserved. The first thing I'll point out on the slide, it shows the accommodation schedule It doesn't show any 1 or 2 beds within the mix, and hence officers' concern with its with the housing mix provided. It doesn't provide any affordable housing. Despite the policy requirement being 30%, the applicant did submit a viability assessment. However, the council sought independent specialist advice who didn't agree with the findings and considered that affordable housing would be viable. Nonetheless, the layout itself, officers have concern with its car dominance, cars parked in front of the houses, cars positioned in prominent locations. Moving to the vehicle tracking plan, it shows fire appliance and refuse vehicles in and out of the site. Officers consider that the turning head opposite plot 13 is quite tight and constrained when you look at the swept paths shown. It also indicates that what officers would usually expect where cars are parked or very prominent within the public realm, we'd expect to see a level of mitigation to help mitigate that visual impact. Focused in steel here, for example, on that turning head, we've shown a generous tree canopy. However, the swept path shows that a vehicle would be in conflict with that. So there's concerns about the level of mitigation that could be achieved to mitigate that layout. This is a public right-of-way map, so the Highway Authority objected to the application due to the application obstructing the public right-of-way. I've overlaid the definitive route over the site, which shows it to be obstructed by gardens and buildings. So it is open to, on the grant of permission, to consider the authority making an order to divert the footpath. However, the objection from Essex Highways and the lack of further communication from them suggesting that would be acceptable means that we wouldn't necessarily rely on leaving that to condition. As I say, layout isn't reserved, so that layout would be fixed. So if we were to condition it and that diversion order were to be refused by the authority, it would leave the application unable to be implemented. So taking this with the site photos on context, this is the access from London Road. This is visibility looking both ways, so there's sufficient visibility in both directions. This is views into the developed area at the north of the site, so you can see storage containers and sort of ancillary buildings to the uses that go on there. So the site's partially developed, but as you can see here, the remainder of the site is relatively open in its form. So this is looking across the eastern perimeter of the site. Just off the left of this image would be the rears of the houses on London Road. This is the southern perimeter, difficult to see, but you can see the highway sidings there of the A120. So in this position, the A120 elevates, so it's at a higher level than the site. Views looking northeast across the site. So this is generally the trajectory of footpath 141, which meets here with the public right-of-way footpath 73. Sort of central of that path there is this. It's a small watercourse. It's suggested, well, on the plans, it's shown to be, well, it escapes me what it's meant to, what it's called, but it's a small watercourse. When I was there, it's quite shallow, but there was a constant flow. So members will note that within the lead local flood authority's objection, the impact on this watercourse was considered, and the environmental agency, when contacted, provided no comment. So nonetheless, the site is allocated for a development boundary amendment in draft form. So officers consider it's within a sustainable location. It partially reuses previously developed land. Currently, the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply given the age of the Section 1 plan, and therefore the tilted balance would be engaged. Hence, officers would require strong reasons to demonstrate that permission shouldn't be granted. However, in terms of harms, officers consider the layout to be unacceptable for reasons in the committee report, would obstruct a public right-of-way with no secured diversion. The noise impacts from the A120 are not addressed. We don't have a noise impact assessment, and we're fairly versed in an appeal nearby to the site when such a noise impact assessment was submitted, that the inspector said they didn't agree that the recommendations made within that noise impact assessment would create a good living environment. It included measures such as keeping windows closed, which drew concerns of what happens in continually hot summers. Nonetheless, there are also concerns about tree and habitat loss, with no surveys provided in that respect, and insufficient ecological information. This is where their preliminary ecology appraisal recommended further surveys for reptiles, which considered a high likelihood on site, but those surveys weren't conducted, and the case law is quite clear that that has to happen before a determination, so we can be clear on those impacts. There's also concerns with the BNG information submitted. Lead local flood authorities also raised issues with the drainage proposal, and in addition, as noted, the housing mix is unacceptable and the lack of affordable housing is not accepted. As a result of the reasons for refusal, officers have progressed discussions with regards to planning obligations. This would include open space, education, and the like, but that process hasn't been entered into. But should the applicant be minded to appeal, a draft 106 to that effect could be drafted at that stage. But nonetheless, given what's outlined, officers consider there are strong reasons to refuse this application for the reasons set out within Appendix 1 of the published committee report. That's the end of my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, I would, sorry, add, there was an update. We had a late representation which I circulated and left on the table of members. Effectively, it raised concern with the treatment of the footpath. Officers also have concern with how the footpath, well, has essentially not been addressed by the permission, has been obstructed. There's a reference made to the certificate with the person, affected person not being included within the notification list. However, officers would note have been provided the opportunity to comment and have commented during the life of the application, first on the 22nd of January and again on the 3rd of March. Nonetheless, if the application were to be deemed invalid, for that reason, case law has been quite clear that where the certificate issue, just because a determining authority has made a decision doesn't rectify or cure the defect, and the planning inspectorate, if they were to appeal, would come to a decision where they could consider whether to consider the appeal any further or whether to deem it invalid. So officers don't have clear information about the land ownership to interrogate a certificate issue, but nonetheless we don't consider necessarily that any prejudice has arisen, but that doesn't mean that such an issue couldn't be addressed should the application get to appeal and the planning inspectorate considers the representations. As I say, if that becomes clear, officers can make our own representations in that regard, and the affected party, as they have commented, will be notified of the appeal and can make their representations to the planning inspectorate. So, so that would be, looping back to the recommendation, yes, recommended, it's refused, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jack, for taking us through that. Members, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it's clear from the officer's presentation, and thank you, Jack, for presenting it to us this evening. I think it falls well below the standard that we would expect as a planning authority for an application like this, and it fails on a number of reasons. Personally, I think the ones that stick out for me are the fact that they are trying to sidestep our affordable housing policy and process. It's clearly set out in the National Planning Policy Framework, but also within our own local plan of providing affordable houses, and to try and sidestep that, I think is quite a big swerve, and not one that we take to quite lightly. Unfortunately, it's always been as part of our make-up to deliver affordable housing in this district. I think the second one that stands out for me is just the sheer vicinity of which some of those houses would be to the A120. Whilst you can see on one of the slides, I don't know if you can just bring it up, Jack, but if you can just see the other development which has been thought out with regards to where it ends. Yeah, so you kind of got it there. So kind of the middle of the picture there, the large development there ends on that, or where the A120 starts to taper off and starts to move west towards Dunmow. Anything any development south of where that existing development ends is just going to be such an impact on anyone who happens to reside in that area. It is just so close to a busy road network, and we know how busy that road network is at the best of times, not just during rush hour times. I just think it would just be a real detriment to anyone living there trying to find some sort of peace and quiet, or indeed, as you mentioned, to kind of ventilate their homes during the summertime. I think it would just be nigh on impossible to get any kind of peace and quiet, let alone the smell of fumes, etc. For that reason, Madam Chairman, I'd be happy to move officer's recommendation, but I'd be happy to wait and see what other members might have to say on the issue.
Councillor Abbott?
Yeah, just briefly, I agree with all of that, and I won't repeat it. I think it's very rare. In fact, I can't. Maybe we have had one before, but to have 10 reasons for refusal, that's a bingo card, isn't it? But the one that really got me was the public right of way. I mean, public rights of way have significant highway rights. You know, to be able to go backwards and forwards along a public right of way. I mean, what are they thinking? Because I believe there was a TV story I saw some years ago about this, where a developer did this, and people could exercise their right to walk through someone's back garden, knock on the back door and say, can I come through your house? So, you know, you would have thought they would have sorted that out with the county council first. So I think that for me is a standout, an amazing thing to try and do. So yes, I fully agree with the officers that we should be refusing this.
Okay, does anybody else wish to make any further comment? In which case it has been moved by Councillor Ritchie, seconded by Councillor Abbott, that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal? That is unanimous again. Thank you, members. That brings us to the end this evening.